So I am here with Alison Witt from Eucharist Church in Hamilton, and Alison has been working with refugee ministry for some time. So thanks for meeting with me, Alison.
Good to be here, with you.
Yeah, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about the ministry that you have and ways that it's really grown in the last few years. And then also, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us a little about how has COVID-19 impacted your ministry and the people that you're serving?
Yeah. Well, I guess, it's probably helpful just to give a little bit of how our church got involved with refugees. So Eucharist is about a 10-year-old church plant, and we've been involved with refugees pretty much since the beginning. It's been something that's been on our radar and a lot of people have been interested in. So we started, I would think the beginning was volunteering at one of the refugee shelters, well, the only refugee shelter here in Hamilton, Micah House. So we had people involved there. We would bring meals and eat with the residents there and got to know some of the refugees staying there. And that kind of grew. And then I think I guess it was around 2016 when there were so many Syrians coming to Canada. That really, there's lots of kind of God stories about how we got involved with that, but we got to meet lots of the families, Syrian families coming to Hamilton. And that, we kind of built relationships with people. We got to invite some of the women to come and cook. We wanted to have a welcome meal, like a kind of community meals. It was a big part of the culture of our church. So it was like, let's invite them. And they said, we'd love to come, but only if you let us cook. And so we said, well, only if you let us cook with you and learn. And so we had a bunch of Syrian women and a bunch of women from our church, and we had a big meal together. And that kind of led to some other, like we did a big Christmas celebration together. And I think, then I think, we did end up doing sponsorships as well. So we've done 2 sponsorships where we get to help a person or a family who's not yet in Canada come. And so a single woman from Iraq that we sponsored, and then more recently a family who are relatives of a woman who's a part of our congregation, Eritrean family. And so that was really good too. And I think, just kind of expanding the ways that we were involved or are involved with refugees. And then most recently, we kind of became aware, because we couldn't not be aware of just the housing realities in our city, and I think most urban centers in Canada, just the housing crisis, not being able to find any affordable housing, shelters being full. We became aware that Micah House, that refugee claimant shelter here, had turned away 500 people that year just because they didn't have room for them. And we learned that the city shelters had like 50% of the people staying there were refugee claimants, but they didn't really know how to support them well. So we were kind of sitting with that and kind of feeling like, we need to be able to respond to this somehow. More needs to happen. And I guess we were also kind of being convicted and challenged by just what does hospitality look like, and the kind of living into the call for hospitality within our Christian faith. And so kind of putting those 2 things together, we were really drawn to this model that we've come to call open homes, where we are able to offer short-term housing for newly arrived refugee claimants in people's homes. So people that have an extra bedroom, or a few people have like an in-law suite down their basement that they aren't really using. And they would invite someone to stay with them for a few months. And then we kind of surround them with supports as well. And so that we are doing together with some other churches in Hamilton. So Eucharist has been a key part of that, but we've been working with some other churches to launch that. And so that's kind of been a big thing. In terms of refugee ministry, that's been the thing we've been really pouring our time and energy into. And it's been a learning curve, but it's been really good. Like, I think like we have a few families from our church that are hosts. So they have a room, and I think I was surprised. I was expecting, I think, that most of our hosts would be kind of more empty nesters, people that have room because their kids have moved out. It's been a lot of young families. Like we have one family who they have 4 little kids, all under the age of 7. God bless them. But they just they have all their kids actually sleep in one bedroom so that they can free up a room for hospitality. And they are amazing hosts, and they have had several different refugee friends stay with them. And they just, they say, we want our kids to be able to see us live out the things we say we believe, and it's something that families are finding they can really kind of engage mission together, and in a very relational, natural, organic way. So, so we have hosts, and then we have some people in our church who we call companions. So they're they are volunteers who are that come alongside people, so that hosts aren't overwhelmed, and they, do things, take people to appointments and whatever. And we have a couple volunteers who really say, we would love to just specialize in this housing search because it's such a big deal. So they just volunteer to help people find long-term housing and make phone calls and send emails and advocate. So that's gone really well. We've actually now kind of formalized that model, and we are affiliated now with an organization called IAFR, International Association for Refugees. It's a Christian ministry here that in Canada that just allows us to kind of do more things. But that's kind of in a nutshell, I think like what our church's involvement has been and continues to be. The COVID stuff is interesting twist that none of us expected, of course. And I think like the biggest thing overall for refugees coming to Canada is that it's just kind of been put on hold, right? So the borders are closed basically, which is not great in the sense that people who are desperately seeking refuge are now not able to enter. There's a few exceptions, but for the most part, people aren't coming. That's kind of the bigger picture. Here, it's been so the challenge of finding long-term housing, I think, has always been a challenge. It was just kind of multiplied because, especially at the beginning when nobody really knew what was going on and were being very cautious. We just didn't want people going out looking for apartments, and a lot of landlords weren't showing places. And so people, even though they got here, were kind of stuck too. So that meant our hosts were asked could people stay longer, and people were very gracious, and that's happened. And now things are moving a bit again, and people are finding places to rent. I think the isolation, which again is common for all of us, but I think it hits newcomers in different ways, probably. When they don't know anyone, right? So when anybody arrives, they don't know anybody in Canada, perhaps one person. And so how do you actually meet people? How do you build community when everything stopped? Like, you can't go to a church gathering. You can't, I mean, that's not online. You can't, community centers aren't operating, English classes aren't operating, nothing's operating. So I think they have felt that isolation. And so we've been trying to find ways to offset that. We've done a couple things, like many of our guests are from a Muslim background. And so Ramadan fell early on in COVID times too. And so for them, that was like a double blow, because that is normally a time that they would want to be in community, and that's how they celebrate. And so we did, one thing, we did this virtual iftar meal. Iftar is the kind of the daily breaking of the fast. Yeah, and they would often, do that, have friends and neighbors over and stuff. So we thought, well, let's try to do this online. And so we invited people to join on a Zoom call like this. And also some of our volunteers who just wanted to learn, and invited our Muslim friends to share some of their memories from celebrating iftar back home, and shared some of the food that they preferred to eat. And we all broke our fast together at sunset and ate a date, and just did some things that was, I think, very meaningful for them, and helped them feel less alone. So yeah, I think, what else can I say? I think at the beginning of COVID, especially, again, the early days when people were kind of being told not to go out at all, and people were stockpiling stuff, toilet paper and everything else. But, and just the sense of, you need to stock up because we don't know when the stores are going to be open. And most of the newcomer friends they don't have the finances to be able to stock up on anything. They're, well, there's lots of other complications in terms of looking for work and stuff. So most of them start out on social assistance. So you're working with very, very little money. So we were able to do some grocery drop-offs, and our church and other churches were very generous in giving some finances towards that. And people did shopping, and we did drop-offs and stuff. So just to help get through that kind of emergency time. I've probably talked more than I need to talk. So maybe I should stop.
Not at all, not at all. It's really good to hear that you're finding ways to continue to care for refugees at sometimes what's the worst times of their lives, in the middle of a pandemic. So if there was a couple of short things. One is there a way that we could pray for your ministry? And the other is, if there's another CBOQ church that's trying to figure out ways to connect with refugees, either in their community now or even welcoming them in the future, what's sort of your piece of advice that you feel like would be really helpful to know?
Well, I'll start with the second question first. I think I would encourage people to, like, even when, I think finding, normally I would say there are refugees in your community, and you just, need to find them, because people, if you're living in a city anyways, I think, there are people who have come as refugees there. And so just the relational connection is the biggest gap, I think. Most of our cities have programs for, teaching English or helping people find jobs, and they're really important, but I think the church's sweet spot is in the relational side, and in offering friendship, and in those things that they're really important for helping people feel like they belong here, and also just like emotional healing from trauma that people have experienced. I don't know how you do that though during COVID times as much, when you can't go out. so maybe it's partly is preparing for the future, you know, assuming that we're not going to be locked down forever. You know, and I would love, like, if anyone wants to email me, or you can share my contact information, but there are resources, and some through IAFR as well, in terms of just training, building your awareness, and so that when time comes, you're kind of ready to get involved. Because, well, I'll say, yeah, just other, like, there's so much that's good for us in it. Like, so I guess I would also say that, like, you might go into it initially thinking that it's because they need our help, which they do for the first few months, but really we need them. And, you know, I have a friend who works with 24/7 Prayer Canada, the organization, and he's really feels like God is saying that, you know, revival is going to come to our country, to Canada, through refugees and Indigenous people. And I just think that we, as the church, there's a lot of life in it for us as well. I think I would also just say there's people in our churches who don't even know that that's their passion until they meet, you know, and that's what I've seen, is people who were kind of just, you know, didn't really know what their mission or place was in mission, and through volunteering with refugees, they've really kind of, something's come alive, and they're like, this is what, you know, I was made for, and they love it, and they're so gifted in it, and it's really been good for them, as well as, yeah, it's a mutual blessing. So that's my encouragement. And my prayer request is, yeah, I guess partly it's for the church to be into all of that, right? Like, I feel like there's so many voices telling us to be cautious and to be fearful and to just take care of ourselves, that I'm afraid that we would lose sight of God's call to look outward and to be a blessing to the world, you know. And so let's, yeah, that we could really hear God's call. That doesn't change during COVID times. Like, I think we might think, oh, this is special time, so this is the, yes, we have to adjust, but I think that call to welcome the stranger and the call to show hospitality is still there. So I pray that we don't forget that.
That sounds like a perfect way to end. So thank you so much, Alison, for sharing with us. And, you know, bless you as you continue to serve those from around the world and show a true Canadian welcome.
Thanks, Jacqueline.